So then we're going to start with questions. So first question was you, sir.
Minor spoilers.
Oh, minor spoiler alert.
So for Avatar: The Last Airbender, speaking of the not killing Firelord, what type of character would you describe the Lion Turtle as? Because he feels like somewhere in between interactive and supporting.
So the question for those people in the back that didn't hear, in Avatar: The Lion Turtle, what character, what type, or the 4 characters would I associate them with the most? I personally would associate them with an interactive character. Interactive characters are often also seen as mentors, because they're someone that the character goes to, usually only once, they learn from them, they gain what they need from them, and then they move on.
So kind of like a Rafiki-esque character.
Exactly, like a Rafiki-esque character. So you'll be able to see them and then kind of move on from that point. So yes, that's where I would put them.
I understand.
There was a question about how the orphan became post-mortem interactive characters.
The post-mortem interactive characters of the orphans?
Yeah. I remember we were going to go back to it.
I think I answered that question during my thing. Did I answer it? I did, yeah.
You said yes.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
In certain media, especially games like Earthbound and Legend of Zelda, the main character has a certain degree of character traits about them, but they also act as a template for a player to project themselves onto. Would that defy these rules?
Okay, so the question is, projecting a player character onto a character, does that defy the rules that are given? Absolutely not. Because if you think about, I'm going to use the example of Shepard again. If you think about everything that I said in here, all of it applies, right? However, you have to tweak certain aspects of the player to then go into it. So for example, the statement of, they are great at blank and blank, but not great at what? You could make that a character class.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome. So you could do, they're great at hacking and at sniping, but they're not good in holding line combat, right? And by playing your character, you'll realize that, and that will just kind of mold your playstyle to actually fit that character. And then when you come up with the background, again, Mass Effect's a great example, you actually pick your background story in Mass Effect, where you were born, where you come from. And in the cases of games that don't do that, they usually midway through or near the beginning or some ways, they actually give a little hint of background. It doesn't have to be huge. It could simply be, I am the worm that survived the post-apocalyptic universe, and I'm the one who is supposed to save the world. I'm the survivor. That's a great backstory too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. And
One with the black arm.
what?
They had their hand. You. Yes.
Green face. Yes. Beast Boy.
Beast Boy.
I take offense to that. Okay, so say you're like game mastering an RPG, how do you avoid like each of your player characters will have their own like motivations, their own goals? How do you balance all of those in the story and avoid having like one person be the main character?
The best way to do that is to make my villain the main character. They're the main character of my story. They're all support. They have to beat him. And by them going to beat him, they then elevate themselves from supporting roles to main character roles. Because they're now in direct conflict and opposition with him. So they're all equal at the same time. But that goes into a whole other panel that I wanted to do here, but we didn't have a chance to get it, which was how to make an awesome villain. So, but I didn't get a chance to do that panel this year. So other questions? I know you had your hand up.
Now, with that whole, X and Y but Z thing, and even with the supporting ones as well, is there any way to like viably implement that without pulling a lot of irony into that, or is it really just kind of mostly locked to irony without going deep into it?
Yep. You're welcome. The best way to do that is to do the ironic way. And then once you do it, so if you want to say I'm bubbly and happy, but psychotic, then you ask the simple questions. Bubbly, why? What kind of bubbly? Am I just happy bubbly, or am I bubbly because I'm excited about a certain situation? You do the base number, the base generics, and then you boil down every single statement to a not base generic, and then you can change your word. So instead of saying I'm bubbly and excited but psychotic, I could say I am excitable, I'm genuinely enthused, but a sociopath. So you change the wording to more fit. But you always, if you're having a brain block or a writer's block, and this is for everything in general, but if you ever have a writer's block or a brain block, do the generic thing. Because then that gives you what you're actually thinking about. You're not trying to think in your head how to change it. Because anything that's in your head will eventually go away, right? But if you write out the generic statement, you can always look at it later and be like, well, that's pretty generic. Let's boil that down. And you can just boil through it more. So, question?
Well, just kind of a quick question. I'm pretty sure it's kind of an obvious question, but I thought that I'd ask anyways. But what if a character follows their own moral compass? Like they don't really follow anybody and they never really ever did.
If they follow their own compass and they...
Yeah, like as in, for example, those characters who say that they can't rely on anyone and that they've never trusted anyone. Would the why then emphasize the point of like what happened and why they do that?
Absolutely. Why are they like that? Why do they only follow their own moral compass? What other character in their history made them that way? Because they weren't that way when they first started their life. Which is a great point for villains, which I really wanted to go into. Because villains follow their own moral compass. I don't care what the world says. It's pretty much their whole bias is my own way of doing things. But why? Every single villain out there has a reason why they became the way they are. The way they became the reason why could be the heroes locked me up for 15,000 years and I'm pissed. Alright? So I'm not going to listen to them. They locked me up last time. Like, very simple. But you can also boil that down to be incredibly in-depth. Yeah. No, absolutely. There's no bad questions. Any others? Yes?
Yeah, so you were talking about elevating characters a lot. Is there a reason, and is it even possible to de-elevate characters? Go from like main character down to support or whatever?
Absolutely. You can go even farther. No, but on a more serious side, absolutely. You can move characters from a main story arc down. Think of, for example, the war soldier that the story keeps going, but they retire. They're tired of war. So they pass their sword or their armor to their son or their nephew or their daughter, and they step back. They step back from a main character's perspective in the main group, or a support character's perspective in the main group, and become an interactive mentor side character. And they elevate them to main, and they de-elevate. So, descend, I guess, would be the proper way to say it. Elevate, de-elevate. That answer your question?
A gets elevated from main character and Legend of Korra, more interactive mentor.
Exactly, yep. History is a big thing. So if you're adding on to another series, so Korra's a great example, thank you for that. So Korra's a great example. He's still a major focus in the whole world, but the history of the world, not the active world that we're playing in. So he's still a mentor, like he even talks at one point. But it's like, I believe. Yeah, well, kinda. But yeah, so it kind of brings him down that way.
When you mentioned that whole, the figurative passing or literal passing of the sword, could you, at that point, have considered like the actual item as a character in and of itself?
That's one of the things I wanted to talk about before. Sometimes items are characters. The Lord of the Rings. The ring is a character. The ring has an age, an occupation, it follows Sauron, its details, it's a ring, its name, it has a name, it's got a disposition, it's angry and lustful, but trapped. They can't act the way it wants to. They're great at making people invisible and at corrupting people, but they're not that good at doing what they want or going where they want. What happened before the story? They were forged to control all other species. What event resonates with the character? When they got lost, when they got taken from his finger. Items can definitely become characters in your story. And in that case, yeah, absolutely, the sword could be, quite figuratively, the main character could be the sword, the old grizzled veteran could be the support character, giving the main character, the sword, over to another supporting character. You know what I mean? So you could totally do it that way. And you can see how that would create a compelling story for someone to read. They're reading a book about a sword. But you could
be boring.
Yeah, but you could make it totally compelling. Oh, I don't know which one I have right first. Yes.
Can a setting itself act as a crowd?
Yes. Yes, it can. Yeah, the settings can definitely act as crowds. For example, if you look at Sleeping Beauty, the briar patch that he has to go through. That's a direct conflict, and it's kind of a character because it's created. It's got an age, it's brand new, obviously. The occupation, briar patch. It stops them from getting through it. But then it gets more interesting. Who do they follow and why? You have to get into the, and this is another topic for another time, you have to get into the personification of a character or a setting or a weapon or an event to be able to then make it into a character, but you can totally personify a place So if you had like the Dreaded Moor, it's got a definite name, the Dreaded Moor, right? You could make it into its own character.
New York is often that's that.
In New York, yes, almost like it's got a life of its own, kind of thing. Yeah.
This isn't so much a question as it is something that keeps eating away at my mind. Yeah, not a good. But I'm working on a book right now, and I keep constantly questioning myself. You know, how do I make this one character unique, and how do I avoid criticisms of, oh, we've seen this type of character in other works before, because there's that saying, oh, there's only 7 original stories in the world.
Yeah. I've heard that as well, that there's only so many original stories in the world, and they're absolutely, to a point, true. Every once in a while you come across a story like, whoa, that's super original, and then you talk to your grandfather and you're like, yeah, I saw that like 80 years ago. That's on the war in France somewhere. Like, but in your case, for making a truly compelling character, if you follow the template for one, it automatically will elevate them to a more compelling character, even though you could have young hero. Well, you got Luke Skywalker, King Arthur, you got multiple other young heroes, but what makes them different is the background history and the conflicts that they face. Luke Skywalker would have been a completely different character if he faced different conflicts. If he was raised in an imperial family, it would have been a totally different story than if he was raised somewhere on Tatooine by his aunt and uncle Dead Baru. So their background history is what really changes them from generic cookie cutter nobodies to where you want to put them. And then the conflicts that they encounter, they might still be the generic type, you know, like main hero character, but those conflicts are going to be different through every single story. So there might only be 7 different characters, but there are infinite possibilities of where to put them.
I'm actually kind of going back to a point that you made earlier about the personification of like a sword or something like that. Although the idea sounds like really good, the thing that I would be concerned about writing it myself, and it's actually related to the question I'm about to ask, is it becoming old hat. For example, if you're trying to make spin-offs, but you want that main character, the sword, to stay in it, how do you keep it from being stale? Because you could have the first one, the sword refusing its owner. The second one, the sword's refusing its owner. The third one, guess what? The sword's refusing its owner again, because it's stubborn, for example. And how would you avoid it from becoming stale while being able to keep this character in the story?
I would ask why. Why is it refusing all these people? Because if it's refused, if you establish why the sword, even as an object, becomes relatable and believable. So if it keeps saying its why is, and I'm going to use a really weird example, its why is because XYZ is a virgin, and it only is with non-virgin characters. Okay, it's a very believable why. It's magical, whatever. But if you go more abstract, like the Sorting Hat in Harry Potter, it can sense your inner soul, your inner being, and you don't match, you don't fit. But when you finally get a character later on who does, that character is going to be super interesting because the readers will then understand why the hat, in this case, or the sword, thinks that way. And if you can understand how it thinks, you can then react to it whenever it reacts to others. It doesn't mean it can't do unexpected things, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it's also kind of like, if that's the case too, you might have a lot of the same main character because they would have the same kind of drive, the same ambitions, the same thoughts, and the same beliefs.
Right, but as I was telling to him, you'd also have different backgrounds. They could come from different places, and the conflicts to get the blade would be different. And the blade, remember, main characters can't be static. So the blade can't be static. The blade has to evolve. The blade has to change. The blade has to not be a static character either. Otherwise, the blade's no longer a main character. It's a support role, so I'm not focusing on it anymore. Right?
I actually have a good example for that one. Mercedes Lackey in her Valdemar series, there's a book set that starts and there's a sword and the woman has it. She got it from somebody else but it doesn't talk to her. But later on throughout the books, as it passes on to different people, it becomes more sentient and they find out the back history to it. So if you want a good example about like a blade or whatever object, that would be a good series to read because it shows how it turns from just something simple to actually having this whole backstory to the end when it finally goes on to its afterlife.
And remember, especially if you're doing a series of books, if you're writers or comic book artists or comics or series or video games, whatever it is, you don't have to do the entire character background. in one episode or in one book. You just have to know what it is before you start writing them. I don't have to answer every single one of these questions to the reader in one novel. It could take me 12 novels to answer all this, but I know it from day one because that helps me make them realistic. And half the time, that's where all these conspiracy theories come in because they're like, oh, this character is this way because of this, but it's never revealed. And people are like, no, it's not. And then that's what they can predict it because they know and it's realistic, believable. It is now 3:30. Is it half hour or an hour?
Half an hour.
Is it half hour after us?
Does anybody have a schedule? Who is in here at what time?
Yeah, because I like your questions.
Half an hour?
Half an hour?
There's some dawdle time.
Okay.
Wait.
For people to set up or whatever.
Are those panelists in this room right now?
It's a Dragon Age fandom panel.
So probably not.
So I just keep going until they kick us out?
Yeah, so pretty much we're going to keep answering questions until they kick us out. So if you have any questions...
For you to see if outside.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool,
please,
thank you.
thank
Yeah, just in case they're hiding.
So if you guys want to come up to the front...
Yeah, we can answer more questions if you want to hit the red button on the back of the camera there.